So the Mora National Fish Hatchery was commissioned in 1994 and was finished in about 1998. And initially, the hatchery was started to look at sport fish research and sport fish production, but pretty quickly thereafter, it was determined that Gila trout really would be, the best suited species for the facility. So in about the 2000s, early 2000s, Gila trout were brought on the scene. The Gila trout was listed as one of the first species that was listed under the Endangered Species Act. It was actually listed under the precursor to the Endangered Species Act and then listed as when the Endangered Species Act came to be. The reason that the Gila trout were put on the Endangered Species Act is, it's not an overfishing problem. These are in very small streams. There's no commercial, market for these fish. It's more land use practices, fires, natural events that lead to the degradation of the species, and we have an impact on that regarding on how we use our lands. We were able to downlist the species in 2006 as a result of the efforts of the hatchery and the work that we're doing here, and being able to increase the populations on the landscape and seeing Gila trout now occupy more streams than they did before. The Mora National Fish Hatchery utilizes recirculating aquaculture technology in the production of its fish. And recirculating aquaculture is really sort of at the forefront of aquaculture across the world. And so you'll see these systems everywhere, from Asia to Africa and the United States. And what recirculating aquaculture technology allows us to do is allow us to have a fish hatchery in northern New Mexico where water's not always plentiful. And the way it allows us to do that is by recycling and reusing a lot of our water. So the facility recycles 95% of our water. The water is pumped over the fish, so a lot of pump-driven water. And so really important that we have a lot of monitoring that goes into all of these processes. So, here at the hatchery, we've got 24/7 monitoring by computers. We've got staff that are on call 24/7, 365 days a year. Monitoring all of this equipment, because it's crucial that there's a backstop there. If our technology fails, that there's a human there to clean up the mess. So the way that the process works is we're spawning fish and working almost on 3-year cycles, because as we spawn fish, we're looking for those fish to grow to age 3 before we might spawn them again and then them contribute. And so we're working in these 3-year cycles. We're also maintaining 5 different lineages of Gila trout here at the facility. And we're keeping those lineages separate as they've been deemed genetically different from each other. So that adds a whole nother level of complexity to what we're doing here is the maintenance of these lineages and keeping them separate. So while we might have 20,000 fish here at the facility, not all of those fish are compatible or mates for each other because they might be of various lineages. Intentionally, males and females, put them together and then trace their offspring through the hatchery process so that we know that every one of our fish, as we tag them, we know exactly who their parents are, when those parents were spawned and who their parents were. And that allows us to maintain the most genetic diversity that we can in an attempt not to bottleneck our hatchery as we move down the road. And so the process is that we spawn the fish in the spring. The fish are incubated here at the hatchery. They're hatched out. After they're hatched, they're grown to a size of about 1 to 2 inches. And at that time, they're implanted with a pit tag. So each of our fish is tagged. That gives them a unique individual number that allows us to not only track them through the hatchery, but also allows us to see and keep track of them should those fish go out into the wild as well. When we stock fish, you might think about that we're stocking these monster, 12 to 14 inch Gila trout, and sometimes we do, and those are typically our retired broodstock. So after the fish are no longer useful to us here at the hatchery in producing more offspring, we'll move those fish out into recreational waters, which provide an excellent opportunity for anglers to go target large Gila trout. But on the other end of that spectrum, we're also stocking quite small fish and even eggs into streams. So typically what will happen is we'll identify the streams that we want to stock in conjunction with our partners. And the hatchery's role in that is we will load these fish up at the Mora National Fish Hatchery on trucks that have oxygen bottles on them, complete life support system for these fish as they move from the hatchery down toward the Gila Wilderness. And typically we're meeting crews at trailheads or at airstrips, because getting into these remote areas is not easy. It takes things like mule trains with panniers on the sides of these mules. They're hiked in backpacks, they're flown in helicopters. You know, there's a lot of tools in the toolkit that we can use to get these fish where they need to go. I would just encourage folks that are watching this who maybe don't know about Gila trout, or if they do know about Gila trout, is to take advantage of the work that's going on here and get out there and go see the areas that these trout are living in. You know, Gila trout are a special native fish to the state, and a unique opportunity to get out into nature and see, you know, what it was like, and what these fish that have been here for so long, you know, where they live, and these tiny little streams. I mean, there's nothing cooler than hiking back into some of these high mountain streams and seeing these fish and being able to put a fly line in the water for them.